So I am currently standing in the parking lot of the high school that I attended for all 4 years, Louisville High School. Now you might be wondering, why is this parking lot so big? I mean, there are literally hundreds of parking spots in this parking lot here, and to my knowledge, there is not a single school in the Netherlands that has a parking lot this large, let alone a high school. Well, the reason why the parking lot is so big is because this parking lot has to have enough spaces to accommodate both the staff and the students, because here in the US, students drive to high school. Now, of course, not every student drives to high school. If you look off in the distance, you might see those yellow school buses. Some students take the school buses. Some of them are dropped off by their parents. Some of them carpool with students who drive, and very few students walk and or bike to school. But I would say that the vast majority of students in high school, especially once they reach the age of 16 or 17, are driving themselves to school. And this is in stark contrast, once again, to what you will see in the Netherlands. Now, a few months ago, I made a video explaining some of the differences between school in the Netherlands and school in the US. But in retrospect, I did a pretty poor job of explaining the nuances of Dutch schooling because, of course, I didn't actually attend a Dutch school. However, my girlfriend, Nadia, did attend a Dutch school. Bearing that in mind, how did you get to school, and how did most other students get to school whenever they were in high school?
In high school?
Yes.
We just biked to school.
You biked to school?
Yeah.
So
I could have walked at some point because I moved closer.
Okay.
But yeah, everyone bikes mostly.
Okay, so we see somebody biking right there, so I guess that's one person. But most people bike to school, you would say?
Yeah.
So was there even a student parking lot at all?
No, it was just a parking lot for also the other buildings around there, like a gym and stuff.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a student parking lot or something.
Okay, so what about the staff? Did most of the staff cycle to school, or did they walk? Did they bike or drive?
No, I guess it depends on where they lived.
Okay.
But yeah, like some might have biked, some drove.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, because here, I don't think a single staff member cycles to school. I don't think I've ever seen that. If they did, I'm not gonna lie, knowing the students, at least at the school that I went to, Louisville High School, they would have for sure made fun of the staff for doing that. For sure, 100%. It was definitely a big thing when you were able to drive yourself to school. It was kind of that first leap into independence as an adolescent. Looking back on it, I don't think that we probably should have been allowed to drive. And I don't just mean driving to and from school, I mean driving in general, because at 16 years old, I don't really think you have the cognitive capacity to drive safely. But I don't know, that's just me. Obviously, I was fine, but a lot of people are not. Now, I'm not here during school hours, so you might be wondering, well, what are all of these cars here for? Why are there so many cars during non-school hours? The reason why is because of school pride. Here in American high schools, we have sports teams, and people actually show up and show out to support their sports team. So for example, over there, you may or may not have seen it, but that is the football stadium. Now, it's not football season, and when I say football, I'm talking about American football, of course. It's not football season, so I don't really know what they have going on in there. It must be a soccer game or something like that. But you can see it's a relatively large stadium, considering that it's for, again, high schoolers. And it was definitely a very, very big thing being in high school and having the football games every Friday during football season. Here in Texas, at least, football is the most popular sport by far. So football season, I mean, we had pep rallies every single Friday. Did you have pep rallies at school?
No.
Do you know what a pep rally is?
Not really.
Okay, so basically a pep rally is where they let you out of class early. So all of your classes are shorter that day.
Yeah.
And then they let you out earlier, and you then have a choice of whether you want to go home early, which that's what I did every single time, or you can attend the pep rally. And basically in the auditorium, they have the band playing, they have the football team come out, basically it's just a bunch of people getting hype over the football game, even though our team wasn't particularly good and we probably lost more games than we won. But that was definitely a very, very integral part of the high school experience here in Texas. And although, to my point earlier, I didn't really attend the pep rallies, I will say that it was nice to have them. It did sort of foster this sense of community. But again, I didn't attend them. I also didn't play for any of the sports teams. But I mean, we have football, we have soccer, we have basketball, softball, bowling, we have wrestling, bowling, yes, bowling. I think we had golf as well, if I'm not mistaken. We had swimming, we had all kinds of sports, and we just weren't really that good at any of them. But again, it was more about the school pride. If you look on the side of the auditorium right there, you might see that L. The L doesn't stand for all of the losses that we took. It stands for Louisville. And you may or may not be able to see the sign underneath it, but it says Farmers Tradition. That's because, again, it's all about school pride. And listen, there was one pep rally that I did attend during high school, and that was the Blackout Pep Rally for our biggest rivalry game. So you may or may not remember this, depending on if you've watched the video, but in the video where my girlfriend and I cycled to Target, I pointed out a high school and I noted that that was our biggest rival, Marcus High School. You can look this up. You can probably find something about it on Google. But basically, there's this rivalry called the Battle of the Axe. And every year when Marcus and Louisville play each other in football particularly, I don't know if it extends to the other sports, but American football, they have this big blackout pep rally. And again, it's the Battle of the Axe. I don't really know what that means, what that stands for. I never really cared to ask, but I just know that there was a lot of tension between our students and students who attended that school during the week leading up to that game. I remember on Twitter, people were talking absolutely crazy. It was probably pretty similar to how I would imagine those soccer matches are in Europe, where there is a lot of hostility. It goes a lot deeper than just the sport. People are talking about socioeconomic status, things of that nature. People from Marcus were calling us broke, even though our school looks a lot better than theirs. I think you can attest to that as well.
Yeah.
Their school kind of looks like a jail from the inside and the outside, but that's neither here nor there. I graduated from the school. I don't really have any sort of stake in the Battle of the Axe or any other rivalry going on. But I would imagine that given that you didn't have sports at high schools in the Netherlands, right? I would imagine that you also didn't really have school pride. Is that true?
That's true, yeah.
So you didn't have that element of school pride?
No, we just didn't really care.
Did you even have a school mascot in high school?
Absolutely not.
That's crazy. So you didn't have a school mascot, no sports teams, no sense
No.
of school pride at all. So nobody cares about it.
No.
Is there even a sense of a superiority complex where if you go to one school instead of another, people feel better about themselves for going to that school?
I feel like maybe it's more a like level thing of school,
Okay.
where like certain high schools will be for the how do you want to call it, like the lower level education, I guess.
Okay.
And then certain high schools will start from like a middle level education to a higher. So maybe more something like that. Would there be more pride or something? But I don't know.
Okay. That makes sense.
There was no rivalry at all.
Okay, and also to touch on a point that you just made right there. So different people, depending on just their level of, I don't want to say intelligence, but just the level of schooling that they show a propensity for, they go to different schools, right? And that's how they determine what schools they go to.
Yeah.
So that's very different than here, because here in at least the area that I grew up in, for the public schooling system, that is, not the private schooling system. With private school, you just pay a bunch of money and you go to the school. But for the public schooling system, which school you go to is completely determined by where you live. So I literally only went to Louisville High School because of the neighborhood that I grew up in. If I had grown up literally probably a block or two over in the next neighborhood, I would have gone to Marcus High School instead, and I would have been on the other side of that Battle of the Axe. Can you explain a little more about the process of how they determine who is fit for what level of education?
Yeah, so in the last year of your elementary school,
Okay.
you'll take a test, and basically the level of what those results are that determines what level of schooling you will do in high school.
Okay. So you take that test when you're around 11 years old, correct?
Most people are 12, I think.
12.
11, 12, something like that, yeah.
So at 12 years old, you take the test, and then, if I recall correctly, your counselor or your teacher or someone like that gives you advice on which path to pursue?
Yeah, like you have a score, basically, that comes out of that test. And there's different intervals of those scores. There's different intervals of those scores, which will kind of tell you which level of high school education you suit. And then, yeah, maybe if you're in between, or with me it was the case, I had a score that was a little lower, I think, than the education I ended up doing in high school.
Yep.
But my teacher, I think, told me like, yeah, you can do this. So I ended up doing a little higher.
Okay, so yeah, that's very different, because here in the American schooling system, again, this is just the public schooling system that I'm familiar with, there are no levels of hierarchy in terms of what level of schooling you go to. So literally, this school right here housed people who will probably be politicians in the future, some people like myself who ended up being entrepreneurs, people who will end up working high-level jobs, and also people who are currently serving 10 to 20-year prison sentences, and other people who are working trades. And there is just a very big variety of students in a school like this, in a regular American high school, because those levels don't really exist. The closest thing that you'll have to that is the AP system, which is basically advanced placement. And advanced placement is literally just up to your preference. So whenever you're choosing your classes for each individual year, you get to decide if you're going to do AP classes or regular classes. And the only real advantage to doing advanced placement classes is that they position you better in the class ranking system, which gives you a much better shot of getting into a good college. Speaking of which, if I'm not mistaken, you don't really do a class ranking system, correct?
No, we don't.
So there's no valedictorian, salutatorian?
No. Well, when you graduate, they might say like the people who graduated cum laude.
Okay.
I don't know, is that the same word?
Yes, I've heard of it, but I never really knew what it meant.
Yeah, it's like if you, I don't know what the exact grade is, if you like graduate with a general grade of 8 and above or something.
Okay.
But other than that, it's not, no.
So that's 8 and above as an average for all of your classes?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's definitely very, very different, and I'm assuming that because you don't really have AP classes, you don't have a weighted GPA, and you don't have all of those extra nuances and whatnot. And you definitely wouldn't have the rule like we have in Texas, where if you get into the top 10% of your class rank, you automatically get accepted into all public Texas universities. But to bring it back to high school for a second, I'm assuming, based on what I recall seeing in the Netherlands, that regardless of which high school you go to, regardless of which level of high school you attend, you are allowed to eat lunch off campus. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we weren't allowed to in the first year, but after that we were.
Okay, so you were allowed to leave campus, and you could even go home if you wanted, right?
Yeah.
As long as you were back on time.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting nuance. This is more dependent on which school you go to. When my sister attended this high school right here, my older sister, they were allowed to eat off campus, but they ruined it for us, because whenever I attended this high school, we had to stay on campus the whole entire time. But beforehand, I mean, there are a few restaurants in this general area. You may not be able to see it, but there's a Raising Cane's off in the distance over there. It's basically a little fast food chicken spot, and I'm sure a lot of students used to go to that particular restaurant. But actually, fun fact, a couple of years ago, right after school let out, so literally in broad daylight, with this whole parking lot probably still full, we had a 17-year-old student from Louisville High School go over to that Raising Cane's, and I guess he was gonna go get some food or whatever, and a car pulled up to him, someone got out of the car, shot him and killed him, right there next to the school campus. So literally, I don't know how many meters away that is. That's maybe what, 400 meters at most, something like that. So I'm assuming that things like that don't really happen in the Netherlands, correct? School
Not
violence?
No, not like that.
Yeah. And if I recall correctly, this is more of her experience, I think. But you never even saw a fight in high school, right?
No, I didn't.
That blew my mind when she told me. Honestly, I thought she was lying. I was like, there is no way she never saw a fight in high school. But it just seems like the level of violence in schools is much less prevalent in the Netherlands overall. And that brings me to the next thing that I think really distinguishes American schools and Dutch schools, which is the security and ID system. So because we have more violence in our schools, even at a pretty average high school like this one, we also had security. We had security on campus, and we had to wear these IDs, these school IDs, and if you didn't wear your ID, basically you had to go and get a temporary ID, and you had to pay money for it, which still to this day, I'm not gonna lie, kind of pisses me off. I feel like that's a bit wrong. I don't know, that's just me personally, but they should have given the IDs for free. But either way, we had to wear student IDs every single day of school, whether it was a half day, pep rally day, did not matter, we had to wear the IDs. Was that the case at the school that you went to?
Absolutely not.
And to your knowledge, is that the case at any Dutch school?
No.
Exactly.